It's amazing to me. I teach a class at this university in Spain. It's a graduate school class, the history of terrorism. And it was shocking to me that nobody knew who Carlos the Jackal was. Shocking.
Even in Spain.
Even in Spain, where he was active.
Wow.
So Carlos the Jackal was a Venezuelan national named Ilyich Ramirez Sanchez. And this guy was, there was even a movie based on him called The Day of the Jackal. This guy was a terrorist powerhouse. He actually succeeded in kidnapping every member of OPEC's oil ministers summit.
I remember that.
In the 1970s.
Yeah, I remember that story. I wasn't alive yet, but yes, I remember.
Every OPEC minister of oil.
Can you imagine?
At once. And they paid like $100 million ransom. And the reason why we were interested in Carlos was that every time we had a terrorist, every time we would recruit a terrorist or one would volunteer for us or, we would have an access agent bring back information, it always pointed back to Carlos. Carlos was always the guy that was arranging the training or that was acting as the middleman for the weapons. And so we knew that Carlos had worked with the Libyan government. He had worked with the IRA. And as you said a moment ago, there were communist terrorist groups in every Western European country. Red Brigades, Action Directe, the Baader-Meinhof Gang, Popular Revolutionary Struggle. They were everywhere, the IRA. And so Carlos had his fingers in all of it. And we knew that the Greeks were getting their weapons from Carlos. We just didn't know how. We ended up capturing Carlos. It's a fascinating story. I worked with a guy, an old-timer, who's now dead. He lived well into his 90s, named Billy Waugh. Billy was a bona fide American hero. He had fought in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. 17 Purple Hearts, one short of the record for the United States. And then he became a CIA contractor after the Vietnam War. He was doing some contract work for the CIA in Sudan, in Khartoum. And he had a day off. And so he went to the souk, to the vegetable market, to buy some vegetables. And he's just buying vegetables. And he sees this guy. And he says to a colleague of his who had gone with him, "That's Carlos the Jackal." The guy says, "Are you out of your mind?" He said, "I'm telling you, that's Carlos the Jackal." They run back to the embassy. The station chief at the time was Cofer Black, who became famously the chief of the CIA's Counterterrorism Center, and then Ambassador Cofer Black, the State Department's special envoy for counterterrorism. So the way Billy told the story, Cofer was on an elliptical machine in his office, and Billy barges in and says, "Cofer, I just saw Carlos the Jackal." And Cofer says, "Get the fuck out of here." He said, "I'm telling you, I was in the vegetable market, and I saw Carlos the Jackal." "Well, where did he go?" He said, "I don't know. I ran here to tell you." He said, "Well, what do we do with that information? You're going to have to find him, find where he lives." Billy went back to the souk every single day for a month. And they found him. So what they did is they paid these two Sudanese guys to get into a fist fight. As you know, in the Middle East, fist fights are very unusual events. And so when one breaks out, and I saw this once in Damascus, a big circle will form around the two combatants, and people will, cheer them on and stand there and watch because it's just so rare an event. Carlos is there craning to see the two guys fighting, and Billy has a camera. Click, 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 click. And then they discreetly follow him back to his house. They note the location. They go back to the station, process the film, send it back to headquarters. Headquarters says, "It's Carlos the Jackal." Then they came up with the most ingenious plan. They recruited his dentist. Right? They followed him for months. They recruited his dentist. Then they broke into his house. and they put ground glass in his tube of toothpaste. So every time he brushed his teeth, his gums would bleed. And he's like, oh my God, I must have gum disease. I better go to the dentist. He goes to the dentist. He makes this appointment. The dentist tips us off. He made an appointment. He's coming in, whatever, Tuesday at 10. Carlos goes in. The dentist says, oh, you have gum disease. I'm going to give you a little bit of gas. Gives him the gas, knocks him out. Carlos wakes up on a French Air Force plane back to Paris, where he was charged with the murder of 7 French policemen. And now he's serving life without parole.
Mm-hmm. Whoa, glass in the toothpaste. Holy shoot.
People who are watching this might say, that's nonsense. Why don't you just go in the house and grab him? Well, you can't, because he lives in a heavily populated area. He's the only white guy in the area. You're all white guys. You can't be staking out this other white guy's house. Word's going to spread like wildfire. They're going to tip off the Sudanese government. You can't do that. If he's at the dentist's office, right? You just load him into an ambulance. Looks like an unconscious guy, maybe had a heart attack or whatever.
Yeah.
And the ambulance drives to
and
the
in those
plane.
situations, time is your biggest asset.
You bet it is.
Wow. And what a surgical move.
Billy became a legend at the CIA for that operation.
For that? Mm-hmm. I was wondering, what are some of the defining moments in his career? I mean, he's done so much, like you said, but that's definitely...
Billy was also so full of crap. He and I became friends. We did this thing together in Abu Dhabi that was just so much fun. And we were there for months and months. So we struck up a real friendship. And then 9/11 happened. And I didn't see him for like 6 weeks. And I ran into him in the hall. And I said, Billy, where you been? And he looks around to make sure nobody's nearby. And he says, I've been in Afghanistan. I said, really? What are you doing in Afghanistan? And he looks at me like I'm crazy. And he says, I've been killing people. What do you think I've been doing?